Okay, looks like we are live. As always, welcome. This is Richard. Oh, turn the volume off so you can't hear me speaking twice. Richard Worsham here, your host of the Ramblestream. Welcome. I've got another very rambling one coming up here about rambling, and we will see how it goes. I haven't really put too much planning into it, as one ought with a good ramble. So, welcome. Please let me know in the comments if you notice anything wrong with the video or audio. And we will go ahead and get started. So, the program this evening is going to be, we're going to talk about rambling, but we're going to talk about it in light of a couple of things. We'll talk a little bit about the Rambler's Companion, which is the little book we've been working on here over the last year or so, as well as looking at rambling through the lens of a nautical lens, so shall we say, through looking at boats, which I think will shed some light on not only rambling, but how rambling is a pastime which is similar or especially suited for, or how do I say this, how Janus motorcycles and other lightweight motorcycles are especially suited for this kind of activity, and that's why we have started talking about it as rambling. So, as you can tell, I'm already rambling, but we'll go ahead and get started with looking at some comments here. We have, all right, a whole bunch of people we already know, 3 people at least. So we got Charles from the Eastern Shore. Hola, good to see you on. Gary, as always, good evening from East Lansing. He's going to list his bikes. Halcyon, and I have to say it too. Halcyon 250 number 79, Halcyon 450 number 3, and Phoenix 250 number 79. And Confed Yank, howdy from North Carolina. A local listing is teasing me. So you got your eye on a local Janus for sale. Fantastic. Let me know how that goes. We'll all, I'm sure, be interested to see. It looks like we have a total of 12 people right now. I've added this. I don't know if you can see I don't think you can see my mouse. Maybe you can. No, probably not. Anyway, I've added this little thing up here in the corner. It's a little YouTube play button, but it shows the number of viewers that are on. So it's kind of fun to be able to see that. So we got 13 folks watching right now. I'm always amazed at how many people we get on these live streams. It's just wonderful. Confetti, all the live streams that I get on are or that I follow from channels that I enjoy on YouTube. I never make it for the actual live stream. I'm always watching it multiple days after the fact, or at least a couple of hours after it's been live. And so it's very flattering to see everybody on here. It shows we're doing something, I hope, that's interesting enough for people to sit around and listen to me ramble for an hour. It also means that, there it is, up to 14. It also means that there are a lot of other folks that are listening to this after the fact, like me. And I have to, one of these days, look at the stats on these videos and see how they're doing. But I've been doing a lot of thinking about them and what purpose they serve. And I think really we were doing live streams every other Friday with as a kind of a sales tool. And what we ended up realizing was that most of the people on those videos were already customers, or they were people who already knew the basics about Janus, and so they were maybe looking for something a little more, and we were running out of things to talk about that would interest you. So it's not that I haven't run out of things, because I'm always scrambling to figure out what are we going to talk about this time, but rather that this is an opportunity for us as Janus and me as Richard to kind of provide a place where Janus owners and folks that are interested in being owners and that already kind of they're already initiated into the cult, so shall we say, can hang out, ask questions, and really just like what we do, here on the Ramblestream. So anyway, I've been thinking about that a lot, and how, certainly this is not. It would be wonderful if it was a sales tool, and I'm sure maybe there's people that watch this after the fact, but it's more geared toward you all. It's kind of like the Owners Rally isn't a sales tool. It's about the Janus owners and having fun. It's what I enjoy doing. So hanging out with you all. So anyway, do a couple more comments, and then we're going to read, instead of doing a poem, it's kind of poetry. I thought we'd read a little section from what might be, it's hard to say, might be my favorite book ever. And it might be some of yours too, I don't know. It's I'm a big fan. I was raised being read to out loud, and a lot of that was when I was little, and so children's literature is really dear to my heart. But this book, I don't think you can really just count it as children's literature. It tugs at the heartstrings of, I think, everyone who is interested in rambling, or really anyone I think has a soul. So more on that in a second. Let's look at these comments, and then we'll read it. Confed Yang says, on a couple of them, but one I want really badly went down, and now it's back up. Lol. Great. Fantastic. Dave Bowen says, I don't feel tardy, nor should you. Good to see you, Dave. Confed Yang says, while y'all had a big old rally, I was up in the mountains wishing I was on a Janus instead of a HD. Nice. Mark McGee says, my mother-in-law's sailboat is Midnight Rambler. Well, that is fantastic, because we will be talking about sailboats tonight. So that's very apropos. Obviously, I think you've heard of the nautical angle I mentioned earlier, but this Ramblestream will be devoted especially to boats and sailing. So Midnight Rambler, that's a great name for a boat. Did you do any sailing at night, I wonder? If you're, we'll get into that. Top Banana 48, cheers from TT, fender making on Monday night. Nice. Yeah, Brent, that's Brent, who our fender bender. He mentioned that he enjoys putting this on because he works a lot on Monday nights, and then he has another, I think it's a live stream or a podcast that maybe he listens to that comes on after this. So it's perfect. So it's great to see we have motorcycle fenders being made while watching the Ramblestream. Good to see you, Brent. Foxy, awesome. Foxy, if some of y'all will know, is a YouTuber who did a video on Janus motorcycles. And then he's it's been a while, released about 10 minutes of just raw footage of riding on a 450. We had a great time riding together and hanging out. So it's good. He says, good evening. I see the same cream color Halcyon on a regular basis whenever I take my work route around Napanee. Fantastic. I wonder who that is out there in Napanee. I'm trying to think. We've got a lot of riders around the area. He says it always makes him smile. That's great. Charles says, with a lot of riders using riding as a stress release, there's no better way to unwind than to find a back road to ride down and ramble with no destination in mind and no pressure. I couldn't say it better myself. B. Douglas Bryan, hello from mommy. Oh, I think that's probably Brent. Hey, Brent. Good to see you. I'm glad you could make the Ramblestream. Good to see you on here. We'll be talking to you soon. Confed Yang says, I love going to random places to go out and enjoy some camping. Yes. Some of y'all may, you should go back and look at, if you haven't, the video I did with my friend Jesse, riding bikes down to, if you're at the rally, you know where DeFreeze Garden is. It's a little calendar garden south of here. He knows a fellow who, the man who built the calendar garden has a little bit of property a little bit further south of there, and that's where we camped, and we did a whole video on it, only to wake up in the middle of about 6 inches of snow. It was quite a camping trip. Brent says, yep, it's Brent. Great. Good to see you. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started with this little piece of literature here. Great literature, the best of the best. Let's see if y'all can see that. I don't know if any of y'all were raised reading this or still read it like me. I read it to my girls and continue to go back to it. It's some of the best descriptions of not only things in boats, but of rambling. And there are some great sections which we probably won't have time to cover all of it, but talking about the road and traveling and going places for no other reason than going. So anyway, we'll read a portion of this that is, most sailors are familiar with this. I've been on personally 3 different sailboats that had this quote on the on a little plaque inside the boat or framed. So it's a very popular. And this is not original to me to quote this. It's dear to the hearts of many a mariner, shall we say. But I'll read the whole portion for y'all because it's really good. So this is the first chapter, but I'm not reading the whole thing, just a page or 2. "Hello, mole," said the water rat. "Hello, rat," said the mole. "Would you like to come over?" inquired the rat presently. "Oh, it's all very well to talk," said the mole, rather pettishly, he being new to a river and riverside life and its ways. The rat said nothing, but stooped and unfastened a rope and hauled on it, and then lightly stepped into a little boat, which the mole had not observed. It was painted blue outside and white within, and was just the size for 2 animals. The mole's whole heart went out to it at once, even though he did not yet fully understand its uses. The rat sculled smartly across and made fast. Then he held up his forepaw as the mole stepped gingerly down. "Lean on that," he said. "Now then, step lively." And the mole, to his surprise and rapture, found himself actually seated in the stern of a real boat. "This has been a wonderful day," he said, as the rat shoved off and took to the sculls again. "Do you know, I've never been in a boat before in all my life." "What?" cried the rat, open-mouthed. "Never been in a... You never... Well, what have you been doing then?" "Is it so nice as all that?" asked the mole shyly, though he was quite prepared to believe it, as he leant back in his seat and surveyed the cushions, the oars, the rowlocks, and all the fascinating fittings, and felt the boat sway slightly underneath him. "Nice? It's the only thing," said the water rat solemnly, as he leant forward for his stroke. "Believe me, my young friend, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats. Simply messing," he went on dreamily, "messing about in boats. Messing... Look out ahead, rat!" cried the mole suddenly. It was too late. The boat struck the bank full tilt. The dreamer, the joyous oarsman, lay on his back at the bottom of the boat, his heels in the air. "About in boats, or with boats," the rat went on composedly, picking himself up with a pleasant laugh. "In or out of 'em, it doesn't matter. Nothing seems really to matter. That's the charm of it. Whether you get away or whether you don't, whether you arrive at your destination or whether you reach somewhere else, or whether you never get anywhere at all. You're always busy, and you never do anything in particular. And when you've done it, there's always something else to do, and you can do it if you like, but you'd much better not. Look here, if you've really nothing else on hand this morning, supposing we drop down the river together and have a long day of it." That is rambling. All right. So that's a great passage. The part that everybody, all the sailors have on their wall is, "There is nothing, simply nothing, so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats." Because if you're familiar with, especially sailboats, but even power boats, I'll give them that. Water life does have this sort of rhythmic, and in the best of ways, kind of pointless, or can have this sort of pointless but very meaningful, pointed pattern that you follow, that is essential to, that is rambling so perfectly. So, yeah, there we have it, a bit of The Wind in the Willows. And if you're not familiar with the book, which I'm sure most of you are, of course, there's parts about gypsy caravans and being on the road and travel, and my favorite chapter in the book is about, it's called Dulce Domum, or Sweet Home in Latin, and it's about wandering across these fields and coming back home, finding home again after being on a ramble. So, lovely stuff. Confediank says, I love going to random places to go to enjoy. Oh, yeah, you said that. Confediank says, I do like motorcycle destinations. Site for something visit per state. Maybe that's a website. I'm not sure. Straw Dog. Hello. Hey, Straw Dog. I haven't seen you on here in a bit. Good to see you. So, now, where am I? We're going to talk about sailing, and specifically a different kind of sailing than a lot of you might think of. When you think of a sailboat or the activity of sailing, often what comes to people's mind are very wealthy individuals wearing white clothes and prancing about on very large, very expensive boats that are used on the weekends to race. And that's perfectly valid activity. It's very fun. I have done some racing in the past, although not very much. But that is not all there is to sailing. There are other kinds of sailing which are equally, if not more, amazing, and they are well, it's called in cruising is the word that sailors have come to talk about the activity of the non-racing sailing, where you go somewhere, or you don't necessarily have to go anywhere, but you're sailing without the point of beating someone else at a competition. And when I've been thinking about this activity of rambling, that immediately came to my mind, the idea that you don't need to be in a race, like so much of the motorsports industry is all about, for very good reason, is about racing. And many brands and innovations in power sports, whether it's automobiles or motorcycles, has been developed through racing and through the proving grounds of endurance racing or all those kinds of things. So there's nothing wrong at all with racing. However, there are other things that you can do in a boat, especially. And we're just going to talk about boats tonight, not because, mainly because I just want to talk about them, but also because it provides, like I said, a great lens to look at this activity of rambling, and because it will help us understand maybe what is so appealing about lightweight, classically styled motorcycles. So, with that in mind, I wanted to do read a little bit from the Rambler's Companion. This is going to be a lot of text here, but the Rambler's Companion. This is actually the next to last edit, I think. So we've had one more since then, and it's basically ready to go. I just actually got the most recent up-to-date one in today, which is almost ready. Everything is there except I want to scale some of the images inside a little differently. Some of the sketches that I did inside of it, or I want to make them either bigger or smaller, depending on where they are, what they are. So I've highlighted some pages here. I wanted to talk about, this will give us a little context to talk more about sailing and rambling. This is the introduction. And forgive me if I skip around a little bit, because I've corrected some things in here and underlined something. So this little book is written as a treatise on rambling, a manifesto of sorts for a different kind of travel, probably more familiar to our grandparents or even great-grandparents than to what we are accustomed to experiencing on the streets and highways of today. The motorcycle can represent a special mode of transportation that has become less and less common in the modern world. Unlike the modern automobile, the motorcycle must balance to an impractical degree its aesthetic and its functional roles, much like a boat. Even the most advanced new models are far more exposed than any other form of transportation. They are inherently unstable, just like a boat, and feature no seatbelts, airbags, or crash protection. At their most essential, they are simply two wheels and an engine with a seat. Yet, as we will see, they can be quite a bit more than that. This book will appeal to motorcycle enthusiasts, but it is our hope that even armchair travelers will nonetheless find here an argument that can illuminate broader questions related to our agency and our individual freedom. The liberty to find our way through the world by the exercise of our own power can be seen as a bare minimum condition for what it means to be human. As our technological advances provide greater and greater convenience, safety, and efficiency, they have simultaneously impeded our ability to experience reality in the ways that have traditionally provided us with engagement, identity, and meaning. Crash safety ratings, GPS navigation, interstate highways, air conditioning, infotainment, and all the other amenities of the modern transportation industry have made travel as easy as the turn of a key. Yet, in the process, we have replaced our intrinsic human need for auto locomotion with a myriad selection of features and technologies intended to usher us from one place to another with as little awareness of our movement as possible. For modern consumers, the question of which armchair is more comfortable would perhaps be more appropriate than what kind of transmission they would prefer when it comes to selecting a vehicle. Even motorcyclists have become victims to this rising tide of features, horsepower, and comfort. Today, smaller displacement, lightweight motorcycles are considered to be beginner or budget bikes for those who cannot handle or afford the larger, heavier, more technologically laden machines that have come to count as real motorcycles. A small cadre of riders remember the joys and benefits of lightweight, simple motorcycles and understand the immediacy that such machines enjoin. We will argue that this level of engagement has more to do with why we ride than the extreme specifications that form what we call the big bike lie. We are self-moving creatures who define ourselves in relation to the innately human concept of freedom. It should not be in the least surprising that the loss of immediacy would result in dissatisfaction, especially for the more adventurous among us. In this sense, our modern situation could be described as a moment of choice or crisis, not just in transportation, but in existence itself. The term crisis often connotes a negative outcome, but it is also a sign that a previously successful solution has become ineffective in adapting to new and different conditions. Seen in this light, a crisis is a positive sign of recalibration, an attempt to strike a new balance with a changed reality. This little book seeks not, and I'll come back to this in a minute, but it seeks not for a Luddite. The Luddites were the people that followed the mythical Ned Ludd, who is this English. This is during the English Industrial Revolution, and they would smash the textile mill machines because they were taking away all the jobs from these highly skilled cottage laborers who are making these things in their homes, and they moved them to factories. So the Luddites although I don't think it's true, but they have come to represent anyone who doesn't like modern things, which isn't necessarily fair to them. But this desire that I'm talking about here it shouldn't be seen just as all new things are bad. Just like Janus motorcycles are not about trying to forget or ignore modernity. We believe in, well, you can see we've just introduced a fuel-injected motorcycle. We have disc brakes. However, we want to measure our use of these things so that they serve us, not that we are having to choose these things because somebody else said so or because the machine is telling us we need them. If that makes any sense. I can do a better job explaining that in a minute. But this little book seeks not for a Luddite rejection of modernity or of technology or a retro nostalgia dipping into an imaginary past, but for just such a recalibration, aligned with a fully human approach to reality. The motorcycle as a machine is fully a product of the modern technological society, but has the unique capacity among other machines of amplifying our embodied capacities instead of taking away from our humanity. It's kind of what I was getting at there. This book is not so much a handbook for motorcyclists as a defense of the purely subjective experience of riding. That experience holds the potential for transformation, for anyone interested in uncovering the reasons we move, ride, or travel at all. And that's what we're going to start talking about, and that's where I think that sailing has so much to teach us. So, let me look at my agenda here. We will look at a little section here on cruising that I talk about, and then we'll talk a little bit more. We'll dig in more. So this is the third chapter, and it's where we talk about two different kinds of fun, and we'll get into that transformative capacity in boats. So bear with me. Chapter 3, fun number 1 versus fun number 2. The Rambler knows the difference between what our friend Jack Robinson of the Four-Stroke Singles Owners Club, or FESNOC, has called fun number 1 and fun number 2. For Jack, fun number 1 is like eating a candy bar. It tastes good now, but at best, it doesn't make us feel better, and at worst, it leaves us regretting our decision to eat it. Fun number 2, on the other hand, is like a dear friend, a really good book, a life-changing epiphany, or anything else that we would describe as transformative. It goes beyond immediate gratification and surface-level appreciation or understanding, continuing to reward us long after we think we should have exhausted its possibilities. Oddly, fun number 2 can be decidedly unfun in the moment. And I think this is really important. Getting stuck in the rain. Think about it on your motorcycle. The way your rear end feels at mile 750 on a 1,000-mile ride. I can tell you a little bit about that. And I'm sure some of you all can too. Camping in a blizzard. Running a marathon or jumping in a river in February. I can tell you about that. You get the idea. Nobody would necessarily say that these activities are fun in and of themselves. Yet we can all agree, typically after the fact, that these are the experiences we remember and that can lead to the greatest transformation in our lives. While fun number 2 may at times seem like the opposite of fun number 1, it can appear to jeopardize all the stability that we have worked hard to establish in our lives. It has the capacity to transform us not just once, but again and again and again. This isn't to say that there is not a place for fun number 1. We can all appreciate the immediate gratification and reward of a complacent afternoon in an armchair, a delicious dessert, or the thrilling sensation of acceleration or speed in the motorcycle kind of world. Perhaps you're thinking by fun number 2 that I'm just talking about work. It can sound like it. But unless you are a professional test rider, riding cross-country in 6 days on a 250cc motorcycle isn't work. Yes, it is a lot of work, but it isn't necessarily productive, right? It's an activity we choose to do for a different reason. Hiking the Appalachian Trail isn't work that provides a paycheck, food on the table, or even a better world on its own. It's fun number 2. To dig a little deeper and risk philosophizing, which I think I've already done I've risked it a little too far, we could go back to that original meaning of ramble, where it meant to wander or roam about in a leisurely manner. The German philosopher, Joseph Pieper, said something to the effect of, work gets things done, while leisure gets us done. Or, to put it a different way, work is what we produce, while leisure produces a better us. I think that it's a really good way of thinking about it. What he was getting at was that leisure is not loafing about, resting, or doing nothing. Absolutely the contrary. Rather, it is an activity that requires discipline, effort, and skill. Replace leisure with fun number 2, and you should get what we're rambling on about. Leisure is not rest. It is the time we take to work on transforming ourselves. This can be perfectly illustrated by the rambling clubs of Great Britain, where to ramble means to walk for the joy of walking, as well as to maintain the paths and trails that are required for rambling, paths which often cross private land and which are protected by ancient common laws, guaranteeing the right of public use. So this is an interesting concept that we are not familiar with here in the United States, where we are, for perfectly laudable reasons, have the concept of private property. Whereas in England, where they also have private property, they have these ancient common laws that allow people to cross land that is not theirs. And so you can ramble, and some of them are preserved by, as long as the old ancient path or way is maintained and used, then you're still able to use it. If you forget about it and you don't walk on it, then it is forgotten. And I think that's philosophically a really complicated. I mean, if we don't do that ourselves, then we forget how to walk, in a way. And there are these clubs in England, and it's actually called rambling, where they maintain these paths and they walk them. But it's part of the walking is the maintaining of the path, which I think is really, really, really powerful. So it could be said maybe that when we ramble and we pursue these different kinds of activities, we're exercising a different part of our, whether it's our soul or intellect or our, whatever you want to call it, we're exercising a different part of who we are that has to do with a kind of freedom, which is really powerful. Or for I'll go back here to the text. Or for a broader perspective, and this is where we get to boats. It's taken a long time. Or for a broader perspective, it can be compared to something like cruising in a sailboat. The great Bristol, Rhode Island yacht designer and writer, L. Francis Hershoff, in his book The Complete Cruiser, had this to say of cruising in a sailboat. Quote, leaving the naval significance of the word aside. So, sorry, I'll interrupt again. Cruising, actually, the history, etymology of that word was what, before the era of radar and satellite, imaging, if you wanted to find the enemy on the water, you had to cruise around and look for them. And so if you've ever read any Patrick O'Brien or nautical history for that matter, you'll remember that they'll go on a cruise, and either they're patrolling a certain section of water looking for the enemy or protecting something, or they are going out looking for a specific target, and they have to cruise around and try and find it. So that was one version of the word cruise. Leaving the naval significance of the word aside, I would say cruising meant leisurely sailing or moving from place to place in search of pleasure, and has distinctly the opposite meaning from racing. By pleasure, L. Francis is talking about fun, but it is a somewhat cramped, often wet, and potentially dangerous fun. Racing for L. Francis, son of possibly the greatest yacht designer of all time, Nat Hershoff, was only one aspect of the sailing that he knew so intimately. He is quoted as saying, quote, and I love this quote, the definition of a good boat is if it delivers the, quote, sensation of sailing. And I hope you all understand what that means. The definition of a good motorcycle, in my opinion, is a motorcycle that gives you the sensation of riding a motorcycle. And that's not a circular argument. What I mean by that is it gives you, we ride motorcycles because they are thrilling and because they are immediate and because they are on two wheels and they're precarious and all those things. You want to feel that when you're on a motorcycle. You don't want to feel like you're driving half a car. That sensation of sailing is something that the Rambler will instantly recognize. It is the moment where the creak of the wooden planking, the vibrations of the motorcycle engine, or the rolling curves of the highway become part of us, or we of them. It is the moment when we feel ourselves being transformed and of being aware of that transformation. So there you have it. There's a little bit of background on the sailing and the rambling. That quote from L. Francis I found in an interview with what's his name? The guys at Off Center Harbor. If you're into boats, there's a wonderful website called Off Center Harbor that publishes videos and all kinds of information on sailboats, especially of the northeast coast, but they cover a lot of different boats. And that's where the Hershoff family, Nat Hershoff and his son, his whole family, were based out of Bristol, Rhode Island, and they built some of the most beautiful wooden. America's Cup boats back in the early days of America's Cup racing, as well as all kinds of different sailboats. I found that in a video. Some of the people who knew him quoted him as saying that. It's not in a book. So, as you all can see, I think we have a lot in common as lightweight motorcyclists with a different kind of sailing. And this is where I'm going to focus in even more in sailing and go from cruising, which is not racing, to small boat cruising. And that's called that's called dinghy cruising. Dinghies are small boats. The word dinghy comes from, I believe, India, and it refers to some of the boats, the small boats that were used for training or pleasure on larger naval vessels. But it has come to mean anything that's small that you can tow behind. Well, it's small enough that you can, it's like a rowboat size, or maybe up to like 15, 16 feet that you can put on a trailer and launch yourself. Real quick here, let's take a quick look at some comments before I keep rambling. Jeepman Dan says, ahoy there. Kidfed Yank says, that's what led me to cruiser motorbikes. Yeah, exactly. Cruiser cycles is the same concept. It's not a Ducati. I want to ride for travel and enjoy the rambling, not for the race. Grant Waves, hello Grant. Straw Dog says, life is an adventure. The motorcycle is my tool to do exactly that. Rambling is the method or style I choose to experience my adventure. Couldn't say it any better myself. Brent says, fun number 2 leaves an indelible memory that can be revisited time and time again. Absolutely. Just like a good book, like I say, it can be revisited over and over and over again. And in many ways, it gets better and better each time. And same is true of great friendships and of great places you visited, etc. Johnny says, I need some volume. Okay, let's see. Maybe my volume's a little low. Hey, Johnny. Good to see you. I think that's about as much volume as I can muster without having the mic right in my face. All right. Straw Dog says, yes, bump up the volume or pull the mic closer. All right. Kidfed Yank says, small boat cruising. Yes, dinghying, exactly. So for well, let's talk a little bit about dinghies. And so for that, we will move over to this screen. So this is the dinghy cruising companion. So you can see where I'm going with this, right? Roger Barnes is a... this is all so intertwined. Roger Barnes is a traditional architect in England. Actually, he's just moved to Brittany, or northern France, coast of France, who has a YouTube channel on sailing or dinghy cruising. So sailing of a very particular type, which in his case is an open, small open wooden boat. Goodness, the time flies. I'm not going to be able to get through all this stuff. We'll make this a 2-part Ramblestream. Anyway, Roger Barnes is... if you haven't visited his YouTube channel, I would really recommend it. It's just YouTube, Roger Barnes. The name is here up on the screen. Or my mouse. Roger Barnes, Barnes. You're on YouTube now. He doesn't need my help, or it won't mean anything to him because he's got many, many followers. But if you haven't visited it, I think if you're into rambling, you'll probably appreciate it. But he documents his weekend trips sailing around the coast of England and northern France. And a lot of what he does is going to what they're called raids. And a raid is like a rally. And so it's just a bunch of boats. They get together, and guess what they do? Just like our rally, they get together and they eat food and they listen to music, live music, and they sail together, and they share wonderful memories together of different places. So it's very similar to what we're talking about. And this means a lot to me. I talk about sailing a lot because I enjoy sailing a great deal, and I try and do as much as I can. Oddly enough, this summer, I have not sailed once, which is inexcusable. That hasn't happened to me in many, I don't know, 15 years or more. But I've just been so busy with Janus that I haven't been able to get to it. But I learned to sail when I was very young, up on Lake Michigan, up on Little Traverse Bay, Michigan. And it was in very, very small boats. Like we started off, we were in what's called an opti, which is essentially a little tiny bathtub. Very, very small. And none of the boats that I've ever owned have been in the least bit expensive. It does not need to be a rich man's pastime. It can be done relatively inexpensively. The old saying, which always rankles with me, is a boat is a hole in the water that you throw money in. And that is just totally the wrong way of looking at it. But I'll just quickly here show you some shots of, here's some shots from Roger Barnes camping on, this is the the headwaters of the Thames River in England. And just, you get the idea. He picked some pretty picturesque spots. Pretty beautiful. Oh, sure, we'll save these. Fine. I'd crop them. That's my boat over there in that picture, which we'll get to here eventually. Let's talk a little bit about my experiences with sailing and why I think it's apropos. I thought I had this pulled up already. Maybe I do. So anyway, let's take a look at some comments real quick. Confetti says there's some shops that'll let you build your own dinghy along the coast. North Carolina has one even, and I have looked into that once, lol. Yeah, you can. There are lots of also wonderful sites where you can choose to build your own, which is also a lot of folks do that from a kit. There's a lot of images here, but we'll try and zip through it here. We're going to do another little ramble slideshow here. Here we go. So the boats that I grew up sailing have ranged from everything as ridiculous as this is called a super snark. And the super snark is it's like the moped of sailboats. It's actually just a giant piece of styrofoam coated in like a piece of rubber. We bought this one, I think my brother got it for like $10. And we installed that white band around it as a piece of garden hose that we made a little bumper out of. It's basically like a window shade and extremely tippy. And that's probably more people than you really want in a snark. A lot of fun. We had a little O'Day 14 that was a little bit bigger. There it is on a very calm day. And then this is a boat that's very dear to my whole family's heart, which is called Pandora. And she was a Nordic folk boat that we had for quite a few years, actually, in total. And really not quite in the dinghy category, but still it's the smallest, it was the first boat to ever be single-handed across the Atlantic. And you can actually sail one of these. It's 25 feet long. It's clinker built, which means that it's lap straight, or the boards overlap each other. Basically, it's like a Viking boat. And it can kind of move around a little bit. Very seaworthy vessel. A couple of shots. There's my mother at the helm of it was actually her boat. She wanted it. But again, this is a boat that we bought for very little. Kind of in rough shape. You had to always had a little, we called it the Zen fountain on the inside. It was just always leaking down one side. Another little boat with one of my daughters asleep in it. My littlest in the big boat. My middle one, she's quite a good sailor, and you can see this is an all fiberglass tub, but so much fun. really small here. This is a kayak with outriggers that you can sail. And then this is the boat that I currently sail most, a Mariner. This is the day I picked it up. I bought it for $500 and it was in really bad shape, but it came with a decent trailer. And stayed up way too late scrubbing it down. This is a Mariner 19, so 19 feet at the waterline. And there's an NM. That's a boat up on Little Traverse Bay. Some beautiful pictures of us sailing up there. A little bit more, where the sailing bug was very much a big part of our family. So this is actually my youngest brother's boat that he had for a while. He was kind of burdened with keeping this boat for a while. It ended up sinking on the mooring. It's a 60 foot boat built by a boatyard down in Brazil. And it was built by the boatyard. What was the story on it? It's like Che Guevara's family's boatyard. It's a really wild story. It had all these plaques inside it from races that it had won in the Greek islands. Really neat boat. Thankfully, he does not have it anymore. He was able to get rid of it. And these are all Herreshoff boats. These are all designed by the Herreshoff Senior. Beautiful boats that my brother, that's what he does, is works on boats. And one of his jobs early on was maintaining these Herreshoffs. Stunning boats. Here I am on the Mariner, and this is a great picture of rambling on a boat. This is my rambling companion. So Jesse, who does a lot of the long distance motorcycling with me, we also sail together. He's gotten into sailing since sailing with me. Here we are grilling on the back of the Mariner with a map, a chart out, and this is a long cruise we did up from Little Traverse Bay all the way down to Grand Traverse Bay, around the bay. No idea where we were going, just sailing around, sleeping at anchor. I think for like 4 days we never touched land. Just enjoyed ourselves. There's our we shocked everybody. We were like, oh, we're coming in from here. And they're like, in that? And then this is the one time we did go ashore. You find some wonderful places. And this is rambling. You're just exploring, making memories. This wonderful gas station in Northport, Michigan. Cooking on the boat. Big part of what we were doing. And here's that sensation of sailing. You're sitting in the boat looking up and you see this. It's like flying. Absolutely incredible. This is the most recent boat I got. This is a little wooden nutshell with my daughter Eleanor. It's a fun little boat to putz around in. There we are sailing it together. That's that same little one that was sailing the other boat. She's gotten a lot bigger. A sunfish, a classic little boat. Anyway, the last thing we'll talk about is a rendezvous that we did with all the other owners of so we basically, Jesse and I and my two youngest all hopped in the Janus van and we made a delivery trip out to New England. And on the delivery trip, we also, Jamie was able to line up a great delivery trip where we could stop in Connecticut last year and join the Mariner. So this type of sailboats owners group has a rendezvous every year. I think there were 18 different boats in the same class that all joined together, and we got to meet and hang out and listen to music and eat food and all the same things. So there we are leaving the shop. They're all the owners with their boats in Niantic. There we all are together, making friends, and there I am in my little boat. There we all are sailing down the Rhode Island Sound and moored with 18 other of the same kind of boats. So where am I going with all this? Well, I guess I'm all over the place, but the main idea that I'm trying to convey is that it is in these kinds of activities where you're thrust into reality in a more immediate way, and where you, like sailing sailing on the Long Island Sound in a 19-foot boat, you'd better know what you're doing. And every single move you make has a direct consequence. And so it does take, like I said at the beginning, it takes dedication, it takes daring, and it takes skill to do these things. And that's exactly the same thing that we encounter on any motorcycle, really, but especially on, in my opinion, a lightweight, lower displacement bike, where you can experience those things more immediately. So for me, sailing, you could take a tall ship, for example, and sail that, but it takes a huge crew and a captain who's devoted their entire life to nothing but being able to operate this boat. And you're probably going to be a passenger, essentially, on that boat, or operating on one tiny bit of it. Even down to a large racing sailboat, where you have, first of all, you have to have a lot of money, and you have to be able to hire a crew to be able to crew the boat for you. All these things you are not able to have that immediate experience like you are on a boat like this, where I can sail it myself if I want to, or if I have to. It's more fun with other people, but it's an activity that you're doing it. So there we are. There we all are, going underneath a swing bridge on the Connecticut River, motoring up the river, up a creek to go swimming. A couple of us stopped and had lunch here, made dear friends with all kinds of other owners. This guy makes sails, the guy with the hat, he's from Germany. And then we had everybody put their boat out on display, and you could put out a little food and drink to share, and everybody walked around and checked out all the other boats. That was really fun. Absolutely wonderful. Then you can sleep at on the this is early morning, girl's still asleep, and heading back. So there you have it, on a rambling cruise. But I'd love to be able to do more rallies like this, where it doesn't have to be 60 people. It could be 12 of you all that get together in North Carolina, for example, or in Connecticut or Texas or somewhere. Get together and have a ramble or a raid, whatever we want to call it, a rally, and meet other people. That's the fun of riding motorcycles. Sometimes, honestly, the more people you have in the group, it can actually take away from the experience. I remember that from moped rallies. The reason that I loved mopeds was the people. And we learned early on that the most fun and the rallies that actually you met more people and made more friends were the rallies with less people overall. So if you went to a rally out in California with 300 people, it's really cool to see 300 mopeds, smoking up the, streets. But you probably only really make friends with like 3 people because there's just so much going on. Whereas with a small rally, like 20 people, everybody hangs out together. You make friends with everyone, and you have even more wonderful, wonderful memories. So, yeah, there you have it. Rambling. I think we're going to be on time here. Last thing, let's look at some more comments here. If I haven't lost everyone completely on this Ramblestream, if they're even still interested. Mark McGee says, love cruising, only raced in college, PE credit. Nice. The aircraft carriers I served on are totally different category. Yeah, exactly. It's wonderful. It counts as sailing, but it is not something that where you have that level of agency. In fact, you're part of a much bigger machine chain of command, etc. Gary said, I had a Zuma, which is similar to a Sunfish. I know exactly what a Zuma is. I sailed a Zuma last year, actually, up in Michigan. Fun little, very small boats, actually even smaller than a Sunfish, and not as fast as a Sunfish either. Jeepman Dan says, and I know Jeepman Dan is a sailor. We've had a little brief conversation about this. My brother had a Spirit 28 that he basically lived on during the summers. We grew up around sailing big and small boats, and there isn't anything more relaxing than sailing to random places. 100%. G-Man Dan says, similar feeling we get on our Halcyons. Well, I certainly hope so. And that's the argument I'm trying to make, rambling along here. Rambling about rambling across the waters. Mark McGee says 1 of 6,000. 1 of 6,000 on the carrier. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the last thing, and maybe this would be a topic for its own Ramblestream, but I wanted to talk about, which was the idea, when you start looking at things like Roger Barnes and his boats, or even me in this boat, with our stoves and our kit, and you all on your Janus bikes with your beautiful helmets and your leather gloves and jackets, and folks like Holly and Jeff, if you went to the rally, who dress to the nines on their bikes. Some people might say that we are, this is a term I've just been talking about over the weekend, LARPing, which means it's an acronym for live action role playing. And I think it also goes to that kind of Luddite thing we were talking about at the beginning. These rallies that like Roger Barnes talks about, where they're sailing these beautiful wooden boats and they have all the right kit. Some of the stuff that he has are just beautiful stoves from the 1960s, and wooden. The boat is designed to look like an 18th century, or late 18th century fishing boat. It's like, why are we doing this? Are we just subjecting ourselves to a sort of nostalgia, or are we succumbing to a sort of Luddite tendency to reject modernity? And I don't want to use, well, in this case, you can tell I'm okay with fiberglass, but I'd rather have a wooden boat if I could. And I think many people would share that. And many people would rather have a Halcyon than they would, I believe, a modern sport bike. And is that just because they want to be like reenactors or LARP, live action role play this thing? Or is there something else to it? And I think that's a really interesting question. And I would argue that, Confetti Yank says cosplaying, reenacting, etc. However you want to consider the dressing up. Although I did see the Cannonball Run with some pre-1933 bikes race. Yeah, it is dressing up in some ways to LARPing or cosplaying. But I don't think that is what fascinates us with historic motorcycles or with wooden boats. There is something more, and that's where I started with that section from The Wind and the Willows. These older, it's not that they're old, these wooden boats, these boats that are part of a tradition, these motorcycles that are perhaps a little bit more uncomfortable than other bikes in some ways, or they don't have the same power, but they have something else. They are appealing to something in us that is not, it's beyond just wanting to look like we're from the 1920s. I didn't get into this because I have any interest in looking like the 1920s. The motorcycle, they're not designed to look like a motorcycle from the 1920s. They're designed to look like a motorcycle that can capture our imagination. And I think the same thing is true of these wooden boats. They capture our imagination and they provide us with this experience of rambling, which answers that crisis that I talked about at the beginning of the Rambler's Companion. The crisis is it is answering a need that we have. So I think we could talk more about that. However, it is 8:00 and I've managed to get through everything. I hope that was somewhat interesting, and that I haven't lost everyone from the Ramble stream. We've still got 13 people. Okay, great. We haven't lost too many. Confetti Yank says, I feel Bart did hit it well in his video. There are different kinds of retro motorcycles from different eras. To which kind of retro you prefer? Yeah, it's true. I think that argument that he talked about with retro could be expanded on, what that actually means and why we do retro, or why really anyone does retro, or in some ways these bikes that are just, or cars or whatever, that are just a modern car decked out in old clothes, they are cosplaying. And then there is an argument also that what are we all doing? We're all cosplaying. We're all LARPing on our Ducati with our leathers on. What do you think your, Valentino Rossi on the street? No. Even, but look at Harley Davidson riders in their black leather and their beards and blah, blah, blah. They're doing the same thing. So why are we doing it in the first place? We should ask that question, and maybe that's my attempt with the Ramblers Companion, is to take a stab at why are we really doing this stuff? And if we are, let's really make sure it's worth it. So more on the Ramblers Companion to come. Thank you all very much for bearing with me, even if we only... we have 17 now. Maybe they're back from the slideshow. Thanks so much. We will return. Let me quick look at my calendar here, because I think I may be on the road next week with up actually in the Boundary Waters on a ramble. Yes, I will be out of town. So no Ramblestream next week, but there will be one the following week. So there's the Confediank says there's something to discuss. Yes, I can at least share the story of the ramble up the Gunflint Trail in the Boundary Waters with the folks from Duluth Pack. We're going to be doing a fun video shoot and just adventure with them to share with you all. Next year will be the full release of that stuff. So anyway, as always, thank you very much, and I will catch you, in this case, in 2 weeks. Adieu.